Reports are saying that Rachel Reeves, isn't bothered about Trump putting tariffs on our country. Another reason, if any, was needed for us to have someone qualified to be Chancellor, not Rachel from accounts. Meanwhile, Donald Trump continues to work at a pace which is quite breathtaking in terms of some of the things he's getting done. James Price is here, though. James, very good morning to you.
Good morning, my friend. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, not at all. Thank you for being here. Let's kick off. I mean, we've obviously got the Radek Obama sentence later on this morning. I'm going to say now, I think if he is sentenced as a juvenile, that will be taken very badly by the people of this country. I don't know what the ins and outs of the legalities are here, but you could imagine Sir Keir Starmer, mumbling his way through an excuse of why the due process has to be followed and how he can't overrule the law and how, because he was 17 when he committed this crime, he cannot be given a whole life sentence. All of that nonsense should just be stripped away, and he should be sentenced to a full life term, shouldn't he?
No, I think he should be hanged. I think I've got to this point now where we have pure evil in this country, and I don't see why taxpayers should be on the hook for paying for this animal to be allowed to live for much longer. Cancel. I think that it's very important that we start to call evil what it is. For those who are watching this morning, you just put the mugshot of this person. I hasten to use the word person up. I think if you stare into the eyes in that mugshot, you're staring into the eyes of pure evil, and we shouldn't countenance it even being allowed to keep on living anymore. I think that is proper justice for the kind of crimes that have happened. But I think the broad point about the sentencing is that we've got ourselves in a real muddle about what the age of being an adult actually is in the UK. In Wales, they reduced the voting age from 18 to 16, but around the same time they raised, and I'm sorry if people are eating their cornflakes, the age at which people could have piercings in their delicate parts raised from 16 to 18. So you can put bits of you can have vote at a younger age, but you can't put bits of metal in yourself at certain ages. There are all kinds of silly rules around what actually constitutes someone being an adult. So I think that they should all get itself cleared and sorted out. But I think whichever way it does, it means that this person should face the maximum possible justice, whether that's capital punishment or, as you say, a whole life order, never to be released again.
I mean, Simon in Spain has sent us a message to say that even though the guidelines will suggest that he can't be sentenced to a whole life term, the judge is allowed to sentence each offence to run consecutively, thus meaning he could never get out due to the number of offences. He says, however, as night follows day, I guarantee the judge won't do this, because on a broader sort of landscape, and there'll be a lot of people that agree with you about the capital punishment thing. On a broader landscape, we do seem to have this terrible kind of collection of people who run the judiciary who don't seem to have a clue about how to do it. They don't seem to understand the feelings of the people. And I know they'll talk very grandly about the purity of the law and how you can't start seeking revenge, and the law is not for revenge. And I think it is for revenge, actually. If you kill someone, particularly if you kill a child, that is all about revenge. It's not about saying, oh, you've been a very naughty boy, please don't do it again, is it?
No, quite. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Is all well and good, but I think at some point it's mankind's mission to send the person to his final judgment on this. But you're completely right. Sentencing in this country has gone completely out of whack with the people's priorities and with any actual sense of justice as well. You have, in some cases, one I think of the people in one of the rape gangs recently, to use another horrible story we're suffering through, got 3 years for being involved in one of these things, which is only a smidgen longer than someone got for writing mean things about them on Facebook. This is completely out of whack. And I think there's the sentencing council, something I didn't really know existed until quite recently, some sort of quasi arm's length body that some cowardly minister would have vested with loads of power once upon a time, go along and say, actually, no, we need to reduce these sentences. This poor young man, maybe it was just Amazon's fault that he could buy the knife, or Tesco's fault that he bought the meal deal, or Nike's fault that he bought the shoes he was wearing, all this kind of complete nonsense. I think that for true justice,
and he's been traumatised because his parents come from Rwanda,
Yeah, well, and I think we're still not entirely sure what happened in some of those circumstances. We know that the father at least stopped him from going a week before, but why did he not call the police then? And we've heard that this disgusting animal was referred to Prevent for 3 times. He was found with a knife on him 10 times before. Here's a fun thing. Let's not attack Amazon. Let's say if you're caught with a knife 10 times, you should be put in prison for the rest of your life. Very simple.
Exactly
Bit of
right.
primary
I mean, I
legislation
had the
done.
misfortune to interview a guy called Lord Carlisle yesterday, former Lib Dem, who now sits in the House of Lords, and was rather pompous about the idea that he was once the reviewer of the Prevent system, and he sat there with a straight face and told me that Prevent does a great job. And I said, well, it doesn't even do... He said, he does what it says on the tin. I said, it literally doesn't. It doesn't prevent these 3 young girls from being killed by this horrible animal, as you call him. It didn't prevent the people on London Bridge being killed by that guy who was supposedly okay again to come on his own to London with his laptop to Fisherman's Hall, or Fishmonger's Hall, or whatever it's called. You know, absolutely and utterly ridiculous. And so you've got these incompetent morons who think they know better than everybody else how to, you know, rehabilitate prisoners and rehabilitate, you know, dangerous ideologues and extremists and Islamists and fundamentalists, and they think that's all fine, and it bloody well isn't.
You mentioned that horrible attack in London Bridge. One of those attackers was featured on a TV programme called My Next Door Neighbour the Jihadist, wasn't he? So even if Prevent weren't doing good exhaustive research, at least flicking through the TV channels, they would have found this person they were meant to prevent and failed to.
Yeah.
Look, we've got lots of other stories to talk about, but very quickly, I think everybody should look at the case of El Salvador. It was the most dangerous country on earth, the drug capital of the world, murder capital of the world. New guy comes in, and what does he do? He arrests all of the wrong-uns. It was very easy for him because all the gang members had tattoos all over their faces, but he arrested all of the wrongdoers, and what's happened? Poof! It's now the safest country in the Western Hemisphere, much safer than America or Canada, safer than other European countries, and all he had to do was lock up all the criminals. It's not rocket science.
Right, and much safer than London, where it's revealed now in the Daily Telegraph that 1 in 12 people is an illegal migrant. The thing about this story that really shocks me, actually, is that this has not come as a result of a Freedom of Information request from the Home Office. It has not come from the Border Force. It has not come from the Metropolitan Police. It's come from Thames Water.
Yeah,
right?
Extraordinary, isn't it?
And in fact,
that's
we just
wonderful.
had Rafe Harder-Manku, and he's actually said very cleverly, he said, actually, these are the real population figures. You go to the utility companies, not the Home Office, because they actually know how many people are using their services.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an extraordinary piece of research. It means something pushing, 600,000 people in London alone here illegally. And you know what? It makes perfect sense. If you live in London or in some of the other big cities in general, how difficult it is to get yourself a doctor's appointment, how difficult it is to get yourself a seat on the tube, how difficult it is to start getting places in the shop to buy new things. The queues are bigger. The infrastructure in general is just completely creaking. And now we know why. Now we know why as well. Crime is massively up because, you know, if you're entering a country illegally, you are by definition already a criminal. You're already committing a criminal act, and you shouldn't be here. And we should follow the leader, Donald Trump, and we should round up every single one of these people and deport them. And some people go, oh no, but it's so good for our economy to have this slave class pouring coffee and cutting down crops in the fields. And just listen to yourself. If that's the kind of argument you think you're going to make, we need to import a slave class.
Driving food around on mopeds.
Well, yeah, quite. The sooner we can get drones to deliver Deliveroo and Uber Eats and Just Eat takeaways, that we don't need people pretending to be learner drivers, by the way. You should all notice that. Every single delivery person seems to have a learner's
That's
permit.
because you don't need to have a licence.
Funny that, isn't it?
Yeah, and also it means you don't probably really need to have insurance. I don't know if anybody's ever run into some of these characters, but I mean, they certainly make some pretty unusual manoeuvres on the streets of London, as far as I can see. And it really is extraordinary that that you know, the government probably doesn't even know this figure, because an awful lot of these people are not actually the small boat brigade. These are people like the Nottingham killer that you might remember, the schizophrenic, who may well be released at some point in the future, who killed those 2 lovely students and an older man as well in a sort of rampage that went on for a few hours. He was a student who came here on a student visa and who basically never left. And there's millions of them.
No, I think this is extraordinary. I worked in the Department for Education, and there was a big push to have lots of international students. And at some point, you do wonder what the point was. We talk about, it's really good for our soft power. But at no point do we ever try and inculcate any actual British cultural values into lots of these people. Huge numbers of Chinese coming over, and there you have a perfect example, an opportunity to say, hey, look at this picture of what happened in Tiananmen Square in 1989, to actually convey some of these things. We don't bother. We just take their money to keep crappy, failing universities propped up that bit longer. Nothing seems to work in this country anymore. And if people at home are angry about this, then they should write to their members of parliament. They should get involved in some of the better political parties and force our leaders to start running this country in the interest of the British people, not of every foreign criminal who wants to break in here and go around stabbing people. It's not complicated.
It's really not complicated, is it? And I mean, I was saying this, and it's now going to become one of my mantras, I think, of the year, because over in America, since Donald Trump has started his mass deportation program, people are actually deporting themselves. They've worked out that rather than being deported in a way which they might not like, and rather than be manhandled by the authorities, they're actually voluntarily walking back across the border into Mexico to head back to where they came from, because they'd rather not be treated badly. So it just goes to show you, if you promise people that they will not be successful in trying to break into your country, they'll stop doing it.
Yeah, that's what leadership looks like, right?
Yeah.
You have actual leadership there. And people in America, although they suffered through 4 quite wild years of Trump, when the economy was doing amazingly well, but they were not sure what was going to happen day to day. They thought, well, we'll elect Biden because he's a grown-up, only to have the most incompetent, Alzheimer's-riddled administration imaginable, full of crazy far-left activism that, again, prioritized foreign criminals over American citizens. They've said enough is enough. They've got a strong leader back in again, and this is what happens. Meanwhile, what are MPs debating about at the moment whilst we're suffering through, terrorist stabbings and paedophilic Pakistani rape gangs? One Liberal Democrat MP said it's really important that we have more women footballers on birthday cards. That was something that an MP wanted to debate about yesterday. We are being led by idiots.
Absolutely right. Let's have a look at Donald Trump. We haven't played a clip from him this morning yet. He's already trying now to stop the war in Russia, which I think a lot of people here would support, after Keir Starmer went and promised another $4.5 billion to Vladimir Zelensky last week without telling us where he was finding the money from. This is Donald Trump talking about his enemies.
I went through 4 years of hell by this scum that we had to deal with. I went through 4 years of hell. I spent millions of dollars in legal fees, and I won. But I did it the hard way. It's really hard to say that they shouldn't have to go through it also. It is very hard to say that.
That, of course, takes us to that rather odd story about Biden pardoning his entire family, and this rather curious practice in America where you can be pardoned for something you haven't even done, or at least nobody's found out that you've done it, so that you get sort of lifelong immunity. It's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, I love the Americans. My fiance is American, but it's one of the most bizarre quirks of their system that the commander-in-chief is able to pardon people, probably including himself or herself.
Yes.
That is a really very odd way of looking at the rule of law, the idea that everybody should be under it. The king here can't do that. His Majesty can't do that. Even Keir Starmer can't do that, although I'm sure maybe one day he'll try when his level of incompetence is found out. But all this stuff about, Biden was a grown-up, Biden was wonderful, Trump is the madman. And you just go and see that Biden has managed to disprove all of those people in his final moments by letting off all of his family, letting off Dr. Fauci, who is sort of the malevolent, evil American version of poor Chris Whitty.
Yes.
They were told that he did wonderful things, but then it's been pardoned not back even from the start of COVID, but back from 2014. So what on earth has the man been doing for the last 10 years? It smells distinctly fishy. And yet again, all the leftists in America are being so stupid, they're proving Donald Trump right again.
Of course, absolutely right. One final one for you. I don't often mention the Daily Star, but this morning their front page says Battle of the YMCA. And I suppose this is a sort of peak Trump season now, because it turns out there's a couple of original members of the Village People who are not happy about endorsing Donald Trump. And there's one particular guy who used to be the cowboy, Jim Newman, who says there's no way the Village People had, with a loyal and strong gay following, would ever perform at a Trump rally. Well, he's got that wrong, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has got this wrong. I just think I don't understand where they've got this idea from, that Trump is some anti-gay figure. Not only is he the campest man ever to be president of the United States, but in his first acceptance speech back in 2016, he talked about how he would stand up for all LGBTQ Americans, which is quite a woke way of putting it in this day and House. But, his Treasury Secretary, their version of Chancellor of the Exchequer, is an openly gay man who has a husband and 2 children.
Yeah.
He just also happens to be an incredibly qualified, smart, sound guy. If you're an evil anti-gay Nazi or whatever Trump is, you don't make people like that your Treasury Secretary. You don't have rabbis speaking at your inauguration.
Right.
Certainly don't dance to the YMCA, as you can see him doing there.
Yeah.
Yet again, it's another bit of what he would call fake news.
It really is. Absolutely right. Good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. That's, of course, James Price, former government advisor, saying some very strong things about Radek Obama. Many of you will agree with him. He says, forget about a full life term. Hanging is what I would like to see, and many of you would say the same thing. Lewis says, I didn't even know Blue Monday was a thing until this year. What a load of rubbish. Glenn from York says, with regards to the nuke subsurfacing near the Russian spy boat, I'm shocked Sir Keir Starlin hasn't released a statement saying, I have not smashed the gangs, but we finally turned the boat back. Loving your show as always. Yeah, well, he didn't really. He waited until it was out of sort of British waters, I think, before they made the announcement. But anyway, apparently we're watching them. We know what they're up to, and we're not going to let them do anything nasty to us. And that's my mantra about this bleeding government.